Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show on the FTN Network. I am your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur, coming to you live on the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest to be exact. And we are officially into the Elite Eight. 16 became 12, 12 became 8. Here we are into the Elite Eight. And there were some great games today, man. I'll tell you what, some very, very good games. If you're new to the show, what we do here, we go game by game from a DFS and best bets perspective, mostly from the DraftKings side of things, but we definitely cover FanDuel as well. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here, perhaps our last 4-game slate of the season. We have in the past gotten some 2-day slates during the Elite Eight. I seem to remember as early as last year. It happened all the time before, but the DK reps tell me that they didn't do it last year, so I guess I got to believe them. It's not going to happen this year, so we have a 2-game slate for Saturday and a 2-game slate for Sunday. You guys know my feelings on 2-game slates. I don't tend to hit them very hard, but we're definitely going to play because there's no days off. I did get the word from a DK rep that there will be Crown Tournament DFS starting on Monday, and there's 3 to 4 games there. And then Tuesday has, I believe, 5 games from the Crown and 2 for the NIT. So we may get a 7-gamer on Tuesday. Fingers crossed. I hope we do, because this 2-game business, it's just not that fun. It's just not that fun. I already don't like coin flipping with the geniuses and the smart guys that play. I mean, there's a lot of sharp people who play this sport. Guys like right here, Razzle, who's in the chat. I just hate flipping, like 2v2s and stuff. It's whatever. So I'm going to play, of course. I'm going to watch. We hit the hell out of props tonight at 5 for 5 on Prize Picks with the Cohen Carr over 7.5 points. Milos Uzan over 16.5 points plus assists. Tahad Pettiford over 12.5 points. God, he is good, isn't he? He is good. That was a really nice one. Zakai Zeigler over 32.5 fantasy points was another one. And then Sean Padula under 3.5 rebounds. He gave us a scare there at the end, but we did get all of those through. So we're going to be hitting props pretty damn hard the next 2 days. So be ready for that. Razzle says, I need sleep while I'm awake. Because we sleep in May, my good sir. You know that. We don't sleep now. We don't sleep now. Congratulations to those of you who are still alive in Survivors. Getting down to the nitty gritty here, you're going to have to start taking some 1 seeds, but all the 1 seeds make it through. It was a tough test for Houston tonight. Purdue played them a lot tougher than I expected. And Auburn was being pushed by Michigan throughout the evening. And then once Pettiford really decided that he didn't want to, go home yet and took over scoring wise, it was just a wrap. It was curtains for Michigan. They don't have that level of guard play. And I will say, Janai Broom, he put up some huge numbers today, but if you guys actually watched that game, I mean, he was okay, right? Michigan didn't really box out, and he got a lot of bunnies, and he missed a lot of easy shots, and he kind of looked, his post moves didn't look fluid to me. If he brings that stuff in against Michigan State, that could be problematic for him. They're going to box out and rebound. So this is actually a very interesting matchup for the Spartans. Guard play I'm going to give to Auburn in that one, but the interior, I think Michigan State might have it. So we'll see. That'll be an interesting one. The 2-gamer that we're going to break down here is already out over on DraftKings. You have a $10K to first, $20 GBP, a $1.5K to first, 44. They had to bring it down a little bit, I guess. Still have the $5 stuff, but everything is obviously getting smaller and smaller. The national title showdown slate will have a pretty big prize pool up top, but I'm really looking forward to this Crown and NIT slates that we're going to get on Monday, Tuesday, and you can be sure there will be lots of coverage. I'm going to be going live on Sunday night, breaking down the Crown tournament. So if you're a DGen like me and you're into that kind of thing, make sure you check us out on Sunday night. All right, let's get over here. You know I got projections ready to go, so let's share our screen. Let's get the team view going. Now, I don't have some DBP stuff and other things, and I barely even got like minutes. I did put in minutes as 2 games, So there's a lot of guys projecting well on this slate. It almost seems like they just fired it out, and they I'm sure they did. pricing just didn't get adjusted. On the top guys it did, but overall, like Christian Anderson's price didn't really adjust. Grant Nelson's cheaper. I guess we're just going to be flipping once again for anybody that is paying attention. There's just going to be a very obvious build that we come across here. So be ready for that. Let's get that popped up here, team view. There we are. The one trade-off here, I will say, because there we go. The lack of mid-majors and Cinderellas this year, like, yeah, that was kind of a bummer, but it has made for some very compelling Sweet 16 matchups. Overall it was pretty competitive Sweet 16. One of the better ones I think we've seen in a long time. I still want to see chaos, of course, but definitely some very solid Sweet 16 matchups, and we have some really interesting Elite 8 matchups. All right, let's start with the first game on the slate here, which is going to be Texas Tech versus Florida. This will take place 3:09 p.m. PST, 6:09 for those of you on the East Coast. So you have the morning and early afternoon time to spend with your family, or perhaps in Razzle's case, take a long nap. It is a total of 156.5. The Gators are 6.5-point favorites. The Gators, man, I know Texas Tech, they've got some Team of Destiny vibes here. They looked really, really good late in that second half and overtime yesterday, but they're going to be playing in a Florida team that when they're engaged, they're going to be very hard to beat. And Florida really was on the ropes against UConn. Say what you will about Coach Hurley. He's a mastermind. He's a psychotic mastermind, but that's what he is. And they really had Florida's number there. The Gators were fortunate to get out of there. With Maryland, the Gators were turning it over so much, and that's what happened to them against UConn. Against Maryland, they had a really rough first half with turnovers, and it's like they seem shaky or nervous in these first couple games in the first half, and then they get the halftime, mojo talk from Coach Golden, and they come out in the second half and they just barrel roll that team, and that's exactly what happened to Maryland. Maryland's very good, but once Florida decided enough was enough, it was a wrap. And what's scary about that is Walter Clayton had a pretty lackluster game, right? 13 points. Took 9 shots, made 3 of them. He just really wasn't engaged, and he didn't have to be. And it wasn't that he couldn't have. I really believe he could have. But once the game got out of hand, saw a bunch of minutes for Denzel Aberdeen. Again, Aberdeen could be starting for like 80% of programs out there. Thomas Houck had a pretty nice game. We saw Ruben Shiniello get some easy buckets. Elijah Martin started to hit some shots. Like, it was just a very balanced effort there. So this is going to be a tough one for Texas Tech. I'm not going to be taking any like bigger spreads than like 2 or 3 points anymore. I thought Houston minus 8.5 was going to be an absolute lock. That one didn't turn out. Thankfully, our props smashed today. And I do think that from here on out, we'll see some pretty close games. Ultimately, I think Florida is going to win this game for sure. And when you look at the projections here, there's a ton of guys who project super well. For a 2-game slate, we're probably looking at a dummy score, like a dummy high-scoring slate. Christian Anderson at 5.2. He was like less than 25% on the last 4-game slate. Had a hell of a second half in overtime. Like, Christian Anderson, if he comes back to Texas Tech, I assume he will, because they're going to be able to build around him. He's going to be a star. Like, this will be we'll look back fondly on these days of rostering Christian Anderson at 5.2 next year and be like, remember the good old days? Now we're paying $9K for this guy. Like, he's that good. He's a great, great player, and he has been getting better and better with each game that passes. And even the midseason, you saw he had some pretty good games. Very raw prospect, but he was hitting shots and competing and just really a fun player to watch. And has a really nice form on his shot as well. 37 minutes is what I put on him. I don't expect Chance McMillan to go. I think at this point, it's kind of like they're just going to do the game time decision thing here. I just don't see him playing. He hasn't been practicing. I think it's very unlikely at this point. And it's almost to the situation where it'd be better if he didn't. We saw with Arkansas and Adutiero, who came back when he played like 5 minutes. I kind of figured he wasn't going to play much. Wasn't really much help. Kind of disrupted things, in fact. And I just don't know that Chance McMillan's going to be able to play here and give them much. the difference between Tech and Arkansas had more depth. Texas Tech doesn't really have any depth. So their starters are going to have to play a ton once again. But we also saw a ton of minutes off the bench for Kevin Overton in that last game, which he played 37, and Kerwin Walton played under 25, because Walton, if he's not making threes, just doesn't going to offer a whole lot. So despite the fact that Florida's defense is so strong, Christian Anderson at 5'2", 37, 38 minutes, kind of a no-brainer plug-in. You see projects extremely well. Then you have the decision, do you want to pay 10-1 for JT Toppin against Florida? It's definitely doable. Derek Queen had a pretty monster game against them, 26 real, 25 real. Julian Reese had over 30 fantasy points. So Toppin's just a special player, as we know. I do worry about foul trouble here. Gators have the bodies to really give Toppin and Darian Williams problems. They're going to be driving. They're going to be just trying to be aggressive and get Toppin into foul trouble. So I am really worried about that for him. And it comes down to Toppin versus Flagg once again. There are enough cheapies on the slate to play both if you want, but we also got to go with our man Walter Clayton, who didn't have the game we were anticipating, and I got to go right back to him, of course. So it's going to be hard for us to play Toppin and Flagg. Right now, I do lean Flagg, playing 37, 38 minutes. Really hard to get away from him. But JT Toppin's definitely an elite JPP play, because he'll probably have some reduced ownership on the two-game slate. And if you're running those multiple builds, trying to find that leverage, getting JT Toppin at sub 40% on a two-gamer is pretty damn high leverage, right? Darian Williams at 8K. I'm okay on him. He's solid. I feel like foul trouble is looming big time for him. Do have some interest in Kevin Overton at 4K, more of a secondary value play, just with the anticipation of he's probably going to play more over Kerwin Walton again, because really is Walton going to do here. And then Elijah Hawkins at 7.6, who's more of a luxury play on this slate. I don't foresee him putting up a big number, but he's going to be out there a lot, and he's going to rack up assists. So I might consider his assist props on this one, but he's not much of a DFS play for me here. On the Florida side, you see Ruben Chinyello is 3.8. If he gets to 20 minutes, he's definitely going to pay that off. We'll see what happens here with Alex Condon. He did return. It looked like he was going to be out for the entire game there for a minute, but he did come back. Didn't really play a whole lot in that second half. Once he did 14 minutes, he was relatively effective. The ankle injury is a tricky one for anyone, unless you're Cooper Flagg, I guess. So I would be concerned about rostering Condon. I think most people will. The fact of the matter is they have a ton of front court options they can use. Condon's going to be under 25% owned. That's a guarantee. And 7K is a reasonable price for him. So definitely want to have some exposure there, especially if he starts, but definitely be careful, because that's the type of injury that can get re-aggravated anytime. I don't really foresee him playing heavy minutes either. Having projected around 27, and that might even be too much. Guards are all cheap again. Elijah Martin at 6'6", Will Richard at 6'2", and then Walter Clayton at 8'2". I think you want two of them for sure. Martin, he wasn't as highly owned as I thought he was going to be at, 6K. I thought he was going to be a whole lot more. In the Florida guards, because they were so balanced, no one really broke out. He did have 29, which was pretty solid either way. I do like, this is like one of the only times this year where we're going to hear me say this, and the season's almost over, but I do like Will Richard as all of the Florida plays, and there's some solid ones. He's actually my favorite, and that's not something that I think I've ever said. Definitely not this season, but ever. He's only 6'2". He plays massive minutes. He just has this propensity to rack up fantasy points without you even noticing. Like, you can literally be watching the game and be like, man, what's Will Richard doing? And then you look at the box and you're like, holy shoot, he's got 25 fantasy points. When did that happen? Like, he just racks up steals, he gets some assists, he rebounds, hits shots. Like, he's very confident. He has an air and an aura about him, if you will. So the word the kids are using now, Raz, is aura, by the way, in case you didn't know. And I just really like him all of a sudden. I really like him in this spot, and I don't anticipate a lot of ownership whatsoever. So Willie Richard is one that I'm going to be leaning on heavily here. And then I'm going right back to Walter Clayton. He's the posh play on a 2-game slate. You can't find too many posh plays, or as we're going to update it here, the Nolan Hodge play. People are going to be skittish. You look at it, back-to-back games under 30. He hasn't been over 34 in each of the last 4 games. Last time they played Bama in a competitive one in which they scored 104. He put up 22, 3, and 6. That's the kind of game I'm looking for from him. The 13 real points that he put up, that was a low over the last 5 games. He's typically putting up 20 plus. I think here against Texas Tech, he's going to need to do so once again, because Tech's going to find a way to keep this competitive, and Clayton's just going to have to hit shots. 3 of 9, 2 of 6 from long range. Like, that's just not going to be good enough. I do think he's going to rack up a lot of points at the free throw line too, drawing fouls on Tech. And if this gets closer to the last 5 minutes, and if it's within 6 to 7 points, Clayton's going to be racking up those points at the free throw line as well, and it's just going to be able to quickly put up 35 to 40 in the right scenario here, and people just aren't going to be on him. So really high on Walter Clayton, really high on Will Richard. I think those are 2 really good plays that are going to be able to kind of differentiate us a little bit on the rest of the slate. And they're not that expensive, right? We can fit both of them and still get Cooper Flagg without having to make too many sacrifices to our lineups. As far as anybody else, Thomas Hawk at 6K, like if Condon was out, limited, or not starting, I think you almost have to just pull the trigger on Hawk at 6K. Filling in for guys who have been injured throughout the season, Hawk has been a really solid fantasy asset, and there's been 2 different times this year where Alex Condon has had to leave early for fouls, and Hawk has just completely obliterated, right? If you're one of those people that just runs those multiple lineups and you get some offhand exposure to someone like Hawk and then that injury happens, you're just binking at that point. So he put up a solid 13, 9, and 4. He just has a way about him to also, like Will Richard, just rack up fantasy points in a hurry. So definitely like him. He's reasonably priced at 6K, but if Condon is playing, starting, and okay, then he's kind of just okay at that price. But if Condon is limited in any way, then he definitely becomes a very viable option. And you can see there at about 25, 26 minutes, he does project over value. And pretty much the entire Florida starting 5 does, and Hawk off the bench. So you can really kind of go any way you want here. Micah Handlogden, nearly min-price. Denzel Aberdeen, nearly min-price. Unless this is going to be a blowout. Good. Florida has that gear, right? Not too much interest there. We don't have to go to them either because we have so many underpriced plays. Janiello makes it pretty easy here. Christian Anderson makes it pretty easy here. So you can do a couple of different things here without having to dip down into the Micah Handlogden, Denzel Aberdeen region. But just remember, Denzel Aberdeen, if he gets any extended minutes, he is going to pay off. He's very active. And the way that he looked for his offense in that game against Maryland, you'd think he was the starter or the alpha on the team. He's just very aggressive. Usage rate in that game was over 20%. Took 7 shots, made 5 of them. He's just very active. I really like Denzel Aberdeen, and coming into next year with the way the Gators roster lines up to look with all those seniors at guard that are going to be moving on, Aberdeen has a chance to be amazing next year, assuming he stays. All right, let's see. Let's move on to game 2 here. We have so many choices. Which game do we want to talk about next? Okay, let's talk about Alabama versus Duke. This one here comes with a total of 174.5. All Alabama games, this is what happens. Duke is a 6.5-point favorite. Now, Alabama BYU opened at 173.5. It got to 175.5 by game time, and it did go over. Duke got the win over Arizona, but they gave up over 90, right? So this is a game in which the 200 total is in play. Obviously, the over 174.5, we're all over that. Why wouldn't you be? And I can honestly say if this total came out as like 180, I would probably hit the over there too. I honestly believe both teams are headed for 100 in this one. Clearly going to be the game that majority of people stack. Definitely. I think we'll see people play Christian Anderson, and we'll probably see 1 Florida piece and then 6 from this game for the majority. So if you get a third piece from the Florida Texas Tech game, you're already kind of getting yourself some leverage there. And mini stacks of Florida Texas Tech could really put you over the top if that game were to go to overtime or go way over, and then Duke Alabama turns into a foul fest. These things, you got to think about these things. But overall, yes, you're going to want 5+ pieces in this game on a 2-gamer. Don't need me to tell you that. Alabama, it starts with Grant Nelson. He's 4.8K, 83% owned yesterday. We had him at relatively low ownership when he first came back and started 2 games ago. That was surely nice. He didn't shoot particularly well. Was it 3 for 8 against BYU? Only 6 points, but he still put up a solid 24 at 5'2". Now he drops to 4'8". Yes, it's against Duke. I don't really care about matchups, DVP stuff as much on a 2-game slate as I do on a 10 to 12 gamer. If this was a slate on a Tuesday in January and we had a ton of options here, I might look at Grant Nelson at 4-8 against Duke and say, that's a pretty good price, no doubt, but it is Duke, especially if it was at Camden or something. We don't necessarily have to feel forced there on a 2-game slate. We do have to feel forced there, but I actually feel good about him as well. So Grant Nelson, no brain play. You can see the projection on him is ridiculously high. 5.3x, yes. Aiden Holloway, I feel upset with Aiden Holloway. I love the way he plays his shot. Used him in, what was it, round 1? Yeah, and he was very cheap. Everybody else went Jaren Stevenson because of the spot start that he got. He didn't do well. He used a Holloway, which was big leverage, but he got like 4 fantasy points over Stevenson, so didn't really get to take advantage of that. And then Holloway has this just monster performance here against BYU, and it really led to them just ending up pulling away from BYU in the second half. 25 rock-solid minutes. He hit 6 threes. Of course, Alabama set the record for threes, but 6 of 13, 23 points, 2 steals, 3 assists, 2 rebounds for 36. Price goes up 200. Yes, Duke is a much harder matchup. This would be the spot to kind of keep him to the side. I don't know if he's a main team look here, but Aiden Holloway is really, really good. I think we see him cut into LeBaron Philon's minutes once again. Philon has been solid as well. He has turned into a ridiculously good facilitator. His assist rate has just been skyrocketing over the last month. And he can score a little bit, but when it comes to, high pressure bucket getter type, Aiden Holloway does have Philon beat. So I think we see at the very least maybe a split, but I think Philon's 30 plus minutes, probably not going to be happening quite as much. I have him right around 27, and Holloway right around 24 at the moment. And the price difference, 4-4 to 6-4, it's kind of hard to get to Philon. But at the same time, I can see Holloway not doing quite as well. Chris Youngblood's really cheap at 4.2, hits a bunch of threes as well. He's probably more the safest of that value piece between Holloway and the others on Alabama. Mo Diabate at 5K, still splitting with Cliff Omarui. Diabate, if he gets 20 minutes, he does typically pay off this price. Fouls be damned. Certainly worried about a bad whistle here on the Duke side, so not probably keying in on Diabate quite as much as I normally would, but I definitely like him. And then we got the massive Mark Sears game. He was 50% owned, which is a lot, but when you look at the size of the slate and the matchup against BYU, it was actually a surprise that he wasn't higher. Put up a 60. Like, this was just the prime spot for him against BYU. Now his price jumps from 7.7 up to 8.5, back to where it typically is. Certainly going to take a lot of shots. It is Duke. We saw Caleb Love carve up Duke. I think we could see Sears do that in a similar manner, but at this price, you're probably going to be hard-pressed to do so unless you're going to make some serious sacrifices here. And I'm assuming most people will probably try to get Sears flag and won't go with that Florida piece like a Walter Clayton. So that is the prediction there. And we just got the Sears game. I think he could definitely have a good game again, but I'm not anticipating a 60, and I think we can get away from him just a little bit here. As far as anybody else playable on the Alabama side, didn't really talk about Cliff Omarui at 5'5". If he can stay on the floor, I do like his chances to get double-digit rebounds. He's been really solid in the tournament here, 26-plus DK points in 3 straight tournament games. And he's been able to stay on the floor playing 21, 22, and 25 minutes. A little nervous, like I said, a Duke whistle, but he has been good. On the Duke side, it's not really a question, I don't think. Cooper Flagg's 10-3, 35, 36, 37 minutes in a competitive game against Alabama. You kind of just have to play him. And man, how good did he look in yesterday's game? He flagged, like, there's a reason why he's projecting the #1 pick. There's a reason why I mean, Broom had a big game today, but like I said, I don't know if I felt confident that it was less about Michigan just being trash on the rebounding side as opposed to Broom. With Flag against Arizona, a really competitive game in which Arizona had a chance to win, Flag just looked like that dude, right? He looked like the NBA player, the best player on the floor, the Naismith winner. I feel like that Arizona performance really sealed it for me and most of the voters in the country and most of the media and probably most of the people and watch this sport, play this sport, grind this sport with us. So Flag is just a really hard fade for me. I think he just kind of coast into 50, and then we're talking about an Alabama team with extra possessions that are just automatically going to yield like an extra 10 to 20 points for the other team's top player. We saw Richie Saunders had a really great game. Igor Demon, both like just absolutely smashed. Even Trevin Nell had a big game against Bama. So Flags I mean, the 60, right? Like we'll see what Prize Picks is offering for his fantasy total. If it ain't 60, we're taking the over. I mean, that's just reasonable to think. He got 2 fouls in the first half the other day against Baylor, and they just ended up playing him through it. So Cooper Flag, got to use him. Now Zion James, the industry was sour on James. The projections loved him. They love him again. He was only 4.9. He's 4.9 again. He had 16, 3, and 4 against Arizona and some crucial second half things that he did. So once again, he's projecting as the top player even at 6x plus. He's just too cheap for the minutes to expect. And I think he gets a bunch of steals here. He'll get some assists. He's just going to contribute in all categories. And if he's scoring, 15 or 16 real like that, which is the most he's had in, I believe, in a month or two, that just kind of takes him into that next category of if you faded him, you're dead. So definitely on James, definitely on Cooper Flag. I did want to not necessarily write off Tyrese Proctor after the big game that he had against Baylor, but we mentioned like there's no way I'm touching him. He did struggle against Arizona, but it's important to note he played 37 minutes, so he's going to be out there a ton. He's priced down at 5.6. An interesting spot to go back to him because nobody's really going to roster him, right? And then you've got the tier with Con Knipple at 7.4 and Kaman Malawak at 5.8. I always like Kaman. DBP here is big, right? We know front court options against Bama have just absolutely nutted. Keba Kaida had a nice game against them. Didn't quite hit his ceiling, but it was a solid floor. And I feel like that's going to be the same thing that happens with Kaman here. He's probably putting up 10 to 12 real points. He's grabbing 8 to 10 rebounds. How many blocks can he get? Can he get any assists? Can he add anything additional to that? Maybe he can hit a 3. Like that's going to be the difference here. 5.8, it's a cheaper price tag, but I would have loved it if he was more in the 5.2, 5.4 range, just a little bit cheaper, because I do think he's probably coasting into like a mid-20 score, which is still going to be good, but probably not enough on this slate. And when you look at the projection we have for him at 24 minutes, he's definitely solid here, almost a 5x projection. Everybody on Duke is just projecting nuts, and that's why it's going to be such a stackable game, right? But I think some trouble could be brewing here. And there's some physicality that, he's up for it, but Cliff Omarui, Mo Diabate, like they really love that physicality, and there's going to be some foul issues here for sure. Knipple is kind of a secondary play. I haven't liked to use him with a healthy Cooper Flag around. I've missed out on some games, but Knipple is just that guy that you rostered when Flag was limited or out. But he's been playing fine, almost 30 against Arizona, 7.4. He's cheaper than he has been, which was in that 8K range, which is price ballooned because of Flag being out. Still don't see myself getting to Knipple, but if I want some additional Duke exposure at a reduced ownership expectation, Con Knipple is that guy that you'd want to look to. For value, we have several options. Isaiah Evans not really playing too much. I doubt he plays much here, even though he is a gunner. We're going to see probably a decent amount of Mason Gillis. We did see Malik Brown, who's dealing with the shoulder issue, play 4 minutes against Arizona, so he's active. So his presence is there. But at this point, Patrick Ngbangba has really earned minutes. He did get 3 fouls in the first half against Arizona. That's worrisome. And then he fouled out at the 12 minutes played. But he still put up almost 12 fantasy points during that time, 8 points, 2 rebounds, and an assist. So he's very high fantasy point per minute player. He's only 3.4, so we get a really cheap price on him. I think Mbangwa is somebody on this 2-game slate you want to play as your value piece or one of your main ones because it's going to allow you to fit in an additional pay up if you want it. And he really only needs 15 minutes to just obliterate this price. And the same reason Kaman Malowach is worth noting. And Mbangwa against this Alabama front court, there's going to be so many rebounding opportunities for him. There's going to be so many shot blocking opportunities when Bama guards try to drive to the lane. He just has to keep himself out of foul trouble. And if he can do that and get himself to 15 minutes, he's a slam. If he can get himself anywhere close to the 17, 18-minute mark, he's optimal top 3 play on the slate. So keep that in mind as well. But when you're building, you're automatically going to want to have in your mind you're playing 3 Dukies: Cooper Flagg, Zion James, and Patrick Mbangwa. For me, if you want to, go a different route there with Mason Gillis or Malowach or Con Knipple, you certainly can do so, or even Tyrese Proctor. But I think it's very obvious the 3 you want in your main high stakes, single entry, all of that is Mbangwa, Zion James, and Cooper Flagg. And it's very, very cheap to do so. Cooper 10-3, of course, but then the other 2, can be had for very, very cheap, steep discounts in a game environment where we may see a 200 total realistically happen. And this would be a game that'd be ridiculously fun if it hit overtime as well. So that's the quick and dirty of it with the slate. My core as it stands right now, very obvious the way it kind of shakes out. Cooper Flagg, definitely. Grant Nelson at 4.8, definitely. And then the third would be Zion James for me at 4.9. So 3 from that game, but also 4th being Christian Anderson. So you can really, do yourself a favor, roster those value pieces, and then you just basically get whoever you want after that. You could throw Mbangwa in there as well, which you don't really need to, but definitely can. Let me see here real quick. And then Christian Anderson. So with James, Anderson, Flagg, Mbangwa, and Nelson, you've got 21.4K salary left, 7.1 average. I mean, that's a pretty solid, strong lineup because clearly 2 of those players between James and Nelson are underpriced sub-5, and then the emergence rising of Christian Anderson almost to a level of Pettiford. Like, I'm that confident in Christian Anderson right now. He's not as aggressive. He's not the ball handler. He's not the primary facilitator like Pettiford is when he's on the floor, but Anderson's really getting into must-play territory here on a short slate. So that gives you some options with the 3 remaining spots. If you want to go with another Florida guard, if you want to play Mark Sears, makes it very, very easy. I suspect a lot of people will build that way, so it's going to put you in that 2 to 3 player coin flip where you're just going to have to hope your side of it outdoes your opponents. But you're going to have a ton of overlap, such as life on a 2-gamer. All right, let's see. Let's take a look here at some prize picks. Let's see what they got for us. Fantasy score, Walter Clayton, 29.5 fantasy points. The individual categories are definitely more profitable long-term, but the fantasy points on alpha-style players, when it hovers around 30, it's just a slam to the over for me. Zakai Zeigler at 32.5 today, like, there's just no way to get away from that. Number 1, the Vols were certainly not going to lose to Kentucky for a 3rd time this season. Felt like a great breakout spot for Zeigler. He's going to rack up assists. He actually started hitting his 3s early in the game, always a good sign. Just that was a very, to me, an obvious spot to target the fantasy score and not mess around with anything else. Because I don't want to get caught with Zeigler scoring 14 real on a prop of 16 or getting 5 assists on a prop of 7. Like, I just wanted the total package. Prize Picks 3 points per steal, 3 points per block. Like, let me just take that total fantasy point number and roll with it. And that's what I'm going to do with Walter Clayton. So play number 1 on Prize Picks, Walter Clayton, over 29.5 fantasy points. Just feels like a very obvious number there. We have him projected for 35. So give me all of it. All of it. Let's see. Cooper Flagg's at 47.5. I said if it ain't 60, I want the over. Still hard to pull the trigger on a total that high, but we do have him at 55.8. So the over is absolutely in play. there'll be some refining here, which will change stuff. But this Bama, I mean, how does he not put up a 60? How does he not? So that's actually too low. They should have just put it at 60 and dared people to do it. I might have still been inclined. So over the fantasy total on Cooper Flag, points wise, I do like Will Richard over 13.5 points. Like Christian Anderson over 11 points versus Florida. LeBaron Philon under 9.5 points versus Duke. That could be a sketch one. I'm sure unders are never fun. We have him right at 9 points here, and that's at 27 minutes. If he loses any other playing time to Aiden Holloway, I just don't see it versus Duke. So we'll take the under on that one. Also, doesn't feel good to take the unders in the Alabama game for the Duke side of it. And Tyrese Proctor, it was like be daring to at 14.5 to see. Let's see, his Demons at 19.5, 17.5, 11.5 on the Goblin. Probably just leave it alone. I was going to say hit the under on Tyrese Proctor, but I think the right decision is to just leave that one alone. So that's what we'll do. Let's take a look at rebounds. Top end number at 10.5. Our projection is going to like him. I mean, we had him at 11 or 12 last game, and he hooked us because of the 10.5 we had it, and it got 10. Have him at 12.8 rebounds. That's a tough one. I'll have to get back on that one. I'm leaning the under, but that's a tough one. Do like the Demon on Kaman Malawak over 8.5 rebounds, just for the sheer fact of this is a great spot against Alabama. There's going to be a lot of possessions and a lot of rebounding opportunities. We have him right at 9.2, so some room there, especially as a Demon play of 8.5, which is going to give you that bonus. You can take it all the way up to, 11.5. I wouldn't do that, but you can really do some damage here. But over 8.5 for Kaman Malawak, that is a good one for me. And then let's take a look at the 3-point shots. Will Richard over 1.5 3-point shots made. Christian Anderson over 1.5 3-point shots made. Those are both big ones for me. I mean, Anderson's going to half his shots, or 60% of his shots are going to be from long range. So good opportunity there for him to hit 2. That's actually a very low prop in my eyes. And same could be said for Will Richard at over 1.5 3. So those are the props I'm looking at there. They've been a little bit better than Underdog simply because they're offering more. There's been a lot of props that Underdog has not been offering. So I've been taking a lot of my action to Prize Picks here lately. But let's take a look at the board and see what we might have. Good time for me to also shout out TBT this summer. Obviously, WNBA starts in May. Going to be covering all of those as well, and a very heavy focus on props, which are offered on Prize Picks and Underdog, and have confirmed that they'll be doing TBT again. So one of my favorite events of the summer. Kind of an extension of college basketball in a way, because you see a lot of these alumni teams. If you haven't seen TBT before, definitely check it out this summer. All right. So I like this PRA they're offering here for Zion James. Kind of stay away from the true PRA lately, but 16.5. So I like that over 16.5 points, rebounds, and assists for Mr. James. Guess he doesn't offer as much here. No Alex Condon props either. On Elijah Hawkins, I do like his under on points, rebounds, assists under 20.5. I think he'll get his assists, but I just don't think the points will be there for him, and obviously the rebounds either, which for his rebounding prop sits at 4.5. We have him at 4.4. I was going to say definitely like the under 4.5 rebounds on Hawkins. Would be surprised if he's able to rebound really at all, except for like long shots that bounce off the rim. That Florida interior is going to be gobbling up a lot of those rebounds. So under 4.5 rebounds on Elijah Hawkins. So lots of prop action there for you guys. Best bets. I like the over 174.5 between Bama and Duke. Kind of seems like a no-brainer, right? Florida outright. That's no fun. We'll have to find some parlays there. And then a couple for Sunday. Michigan State starts out as a 5.5-point dog against Auburn. I think they cover that. I honestly think Michigan State beats Auburn. I'll have to get into that more tomorrow, but the Spartans, I think it's a great match for the Spartans. Watching the game between Auburn and Michigan, I felt like, now, obviously, they played Michigan, but that was a worse matchup for them stylistically, even though they know that team well, than what Auburn will be. So I really like the spot for the Spartans. They were playing exactly the way I thought they needed to be a real contender and kind of flip the switch and look like a team capable of making the Final Four and beyond. They have been starting slow. All 3 games they've started slow, and that's something they're going to have to rectify because you just can't keep these slow starts and expect to come back. They did it today, but if you do it against Auburn, that's problematic. And then Tennessee versus Houston. I now like the Vols plus 4.5. I do still think the Houston Cougars win this game, but now I'm thinking it's going to be a one-possession output here. And the way that Zakai Zeigler and company are playing, there's a lot of confidence. Houston, they're going to have to get a dual performance. It's like LJ Cryer goes off, Milo Uzan struggles. Uzan goes off, LJ Cryer struggles. Those two need to play a complete game together as one in order to beat the Vols. But I will take Tennessee plus 4.5. We have a ton of betting action on the Crown and the NIT semifinals, but that is going to be the Sunday night show. I would encourage, I can't remember if I talked about it last night, on William Hill, though, they have NIT odds to win it. And the Chattanooga Mocs are plus 450. The rest of the field's like plus 270 or below. The Mocs are the real deal. They're playing extremely well. They have Trey Bonham, a former Florida Gator, Honor Huff, who has just an amazing name. Bash Wheeland, another amazing name. Like the Mocs are great. Plus 450, just great value there. So if you're looking for a small future to bet, Mocs to win the NIT with 4 teams left, that is one I like quite a bit. As far as the Crown goes, waiting to really dive in projection-wise and props, because there are props up for it already. Keyshawn Hall, our guy, one of our brand favorites, did hit the portal today. I don't know if he's going to play in the Crown. I would suspect not. However, George Washington has had Darren Buchanan hit the portal, but he's indicated that he plans to play in the Crown. So a lot of the edge on this tournament for us is going to be with news, because guys are going to be opting out the day of or opting in the day of. It's going to be a very big deal. And I know that people are going to set lineups and walk away like it's a regular thing, but it's very much not a regular thing. And I think we see some exotic starting lineups for some of the teams. So it's going to be a very big edge. And there's a reason I'm so excited about it, because I think that is going to be something we can make very, very good money at. So that will be the end of the show here. Appreciate it. Hey, Darren says, just got here. Thoughts with the injuries for tomorrow. Yeah, just I don't think Chance McMillan is going to play. Just another game time decision tag there would be a real shock. And then with Alex Condon, I do think he plays. I think there's a very good chance that he's somewhat limited. And I think there's a shot that Thomas Houck ends up starting for him. First game on the slate, so we'll know. But that's kind of where I feel those two primary injuries will lie. McMillan not playing at all, Condon playing, but being very limited to a degree. That's pretty much the main two pieces that we got to worry about. 8 will become 6, and 6 will become 4. It's a sad, sad moment. Anyways, appreciate it, guys. On the way out, if you could see it in the kindness of your heart, hitting the like button on your way out the door. Any comments that you've been dropping, much appreciated. But likes, reposts, and subscribe to the FTN channel here on YouTube and all social media. Lots of content coming out. Our MLB team is already detonating. UFL started today. You best believe we'll be playing some of that. And then, of course, we'll gear up for the WNBA season, TBT. And then before you know it, it's going to be August. We're going to be talking college football, getting right back into the collegiate season. So I appreciate all of you as usual. We'll be back tomorrow night to break down the 2 games for Sunday. And then Sunday night is the Crown Tournament extravaganza. Be there for that. If you like making money and you like, high edge tournament type college basketball, that is the one for you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And I'll see you